Australia has a dark, bloody past that not a lot of people know about. People think of Australians as soft, nice people, but in reality there has been countless deadly gang wars over the years that have left a trail of bodies.
The two men responsible for a string of underworld murders will serve 3 life sentences never to be released from prison. A judge described them as having a depraved gratification for killing. 2 of their loyal followers also sent away for lengthy stints.
The man in this car is a sitting duck. A hit squad pulls up and a hooded assassin unloads.
In this video, we are going to be discussing one of the most violent, bloodthirsty crime families of all time. The infamous Hamzy family. This vicious gang full of goons and steppers still haunts the suburbs of southwestern Australia. These guys made the burbs feel like Southside Chicago with the amount of bodies that were being dropped on almost a weekly basis. This gang was making a lot of money and had a lot of crash outs that were willing to do daylight shootings and drive-bys in luxury cars like Bentleys and Porsches. The police had to establish over 27 strike forces designated for this family. The family has a unique feature that makes it almost immortal. It's among the few criminal organizations with religious roots. This makes people even more willing to crash out and catch bodies because they believe they are doing it for a good cause and that it will help them in the afterlife. Bassem Hamzy is the big dog and undisputed leader of the gang. Police investigators claim he's a son of Lebanese immigrants that made it into the country during the 1970s because of the vicious Lebanese civil war that was taking place in his home country. All the violence he was exposed to at a young age helped turn him into the ruthless stepper he would later become. This man has absolutely no regard for human life. His father didn't look the part, but he was also a goon that was deeply involved with the criminal underworld. Court records show he was trapping illegal substances and was arrested and convicted for it. Don't let the suit and tie fool you, bro was a real stepper. But his son Bassem was even more ruthless and had grown reckless with how he catches bodies. In the late 90s, he ended up blowing down a young man who owed him money outside of a Sydney nightclub. Bassem Hamzy is a twisted and evil individual. He has no regard for human life. Police ended up discovering that this wasn't his first body and that he had slumped another young man while he was in bed sleeping.
Sydney's most notorious criminals has been charged over the shooting murder of a Sydney teenager who was sleeping in his bed. Bassem Hamzy, who founded the Brothers for Life gang, has always denied involvement in the killing of Braden Dillon 4 years ago. But detectives allege he had a hand in covering up the crime.
He's in custody behind bars, already serving a 40-year sentence. Nonetheless, it's alleged Bassem Hamzy had still been steering his gang.
I think the community expects that we would continue to prosecute those who have been undermining the judicial system.
At midday, Hamzy was arrested inside Goulburn Supermax, the Brothers for Life gang leader facing new charges relating to the murder of Braden Dillon. The 15-year-old was fatally shot almost 4 years ago. The killer, part of Hamzy's gang, the attack believed to be one of revenge. Hamzy has always denied involvement, but now police are alleging he was, by instructing his associates to lie about it.
Creating false evidence which would severely sanitise the true events of what actually happened.
Sparing the true perpetrators from accountability. During his arrest today, Hamzy's prison cell was searched, as were those of 5 other Brothers for Life gang members. In one, drugs were found. In another, a mobile phone.
We will undergo some forensic analysis and obviously attempt to link the owner of that phone.
And how it got into prison.
To make sure that your communication ties to the outside world are cut.
Hamzy faces court again in May. It's expected he'll defend the fresh charges. Tom Hartley, 7 News.
As a result of the senseless crime, he ended up being sentenced to 21 years in prison at Lithgow Correctional Centre. During his time behind bars, he built a reputation as a squabbler that will drop anyone for the slightest levels of disrespect. Bassem Hamzy was a different breed of gangster. He didn't survive in prison, he thrived. Those around him at the time described the young man as intelligent, well-spoken and charismatic. And despite spending little time in school, he had a natural knack for legal matters. His charisma further skyrocketed when he converted to Islam and helped to connect and bond him with other inmates that shared the religion. Bassam was a well-mannered inmate, in fact so good that the prison authorities suspected something sinister was going on. It also didn't help that he was always surrounded by a following of people with this religious belief. Eventually, in 2007, all the red flags would amount to something. After searching the cell, prison authorities found a hidden cell phone, from which it was discovered that Bro was making over 450 phone calls a month. It suddenly dawned upon police that their good inmate was trapping Blow behind bars.
A man accused of running a large drug syndicate from his prison cell has pleaded guilty in a Sydney court. Bassam Hamzi was charged in 2008 after police intercepted mobile phone calls made from Lithgow jail. It was alleged hundreds of calls were made every day and the syndicate generated $250,000 a week. Hamzi has pleaded guilty to supplying methamphetamine and a separate kidnapping charge. He'll be sentenced in September.
But it didn't stop there. He was also paying to get people that didn't pay for their products. This man had the power to get people to do whatever he wanted. They even stumbled upon a phone call recording in which Bassam threatened to cut off someone's ears. His network was more sophisticated than they first thought. He wasn't just an inmate tormenting those on the outside. He was the leader of a notorious gang, the Brothers for Life. Australian gang experts explained that Brothers for Life started as a small clique in the Bankstown Greenock area in Sydney's southwest. It came about after the police shut down the Muslim Brotherhood movement, another gang that was prominent in the area. Besides MBM, some of its members also came from other Middle Eastern criminal organizations, like the vicious Assyrian Kings. Even though he was incarcerated, Bassam was a leader like none other. He specifically targeted Aboriginal youths suffering from substance abuse and offered them hope and religious brotherhood specifically. The gang was heavily entrenched in the Wahhabi ideology. Bassam twisted Islamic scriptures to convince his members to follow his orders. He would commonly describe their brotherhood as equine, and those who didn't sit right with him as fitna. Unlike other street and biker gangs around, money wasn't the initial motivation. They deeply value their sense of religious oneness that inspired the zealous duty necessary for their violent endeavors. The gang grew quickly, and they established their first official chapter house in Bankstown, with Muhammad L.C. Hamzi as a chapter's president. With himself in prison, Bassam chose his cousin to lead the gang on the outside. Nonetheless, he was still the leader, and nothing was to take place without his approval. To say Brothers for Life was a success is an understatement. They played a big role in Sydney's underworld and took part in almost everything.
It was one of the few key players in the underworld. Nothing happened without him knowing about it.
Like what kind of things?
Importation, markets, prices, key players, the bikie board, anything happened, guns. He had a finger everywhere.
They were trapping every kind of illegal substance, and cat. Without a doubt, they raked in millions in illegal revenue. Just to paint a picture there, chapter president Muhammad L.C. was riding in a $160,000 Mustang. On top of that, he parked a Range Rover on his driveway. Despite living in public housing and being on disability support, another member, Khalid Khalil, caught the police's attention after they spotted him casually wearing an $80,000 Breitling watch. There was even a case of a 19-year-old newcomer who suddenly became the newly registered donor of an Audi Q7. It was particularly baffling, since a police knew the teenager hadn't worked a day in his life. Additionally, if Brothers for Life members weren't peddling drugs, you'd find them in the high rollers room at the Star Casino. They were so comfortable that they would repeatedly taunt police officers on sight. At the time, the government had established the Middle Eastern Organized Crime Squad to deal with them. However, instead of fleeing Brothers for Life, gangsters would tattoo Miak onto their necks and even bear the name on their vehicle's number plate. They were rich, wild, and definitely not afraid of the authorities. The flashy lifestyle appealed to a lot of the Aboriginal youths. They wanted to be like their elder brothers. They wanted money, power, respect, and an unlimited supply of beautiful girls. Surprisingly, admission into the gang wasn't all that difficult. You only had to spend $70 on a Brothers for Life t-shirt with their infamous logo across your chest. Additionally, you had to be seeking glory and willing to crash out for high-ranking members, looking for people to do their dirty work. If you survived long enough, then they would introduce you to the money side of the operation. Unfortunately, few ever made it to the top. If things had stayed as they were, then Bassam would have remained the proud founder and leader of the successful gang. Unfortunately, things didn't go quite as planned. Over time, Bassam would lose influence over the Bankstown chapter. It seems that the allure of money was too tempting, and with himself behind bars, there wasn't much he could do. It also didn't help that after uncovering his criminal rank, prison authorities transferred him to Goulburn Supermax Prison, Australia's toughest correctional facility. Over the next couple years, Bassam had very little communication with his old street gang. The best he could do was hear the news about their exploits. He was stuck in a cell while they were making millions, and even though many higher-ups didn't say anything, for fear over what Bassam would do. According to authorities, everyone was fighting for the throne. Some gang experts claim it was during those years that the Brothers for Life gang lost their structure, and it was all because of Chicago drill rap. Pills, music, and alcohol replaced prayers, and they started acting like a Chicago street gang. Religion had now taken a back seat within the gang. Members became even more ambitious as they fought to take over the streets. It was also during Bassam's absence that the Brothers for Life Blacktown chapter emerged. Unlike the Bankstown chapter, which was predominantly Lebanese, Blacktown featured more Afghan gangsters. All the higher-ups got along. The same couldn't be said about their underlings. They were both fighting to take over the very profitable Western Sydney illegal markets. As they fought for money and power, a deadly rivalry started to emerge. The gang had split up, and it was now a vicious internal gang war. Former friends were now hunting for each other out in the streets with blicks and within prison with shanks.
Our News has obtained exclusive vision of a stabbing inside a Sydney jail involving two Brothers for Life members. The brother of the gang's founder was killed earlier this week, and police fear it's the beginning of another Gangland war.
A man in a bucket hat emerges from the left, stabbing a fellow gang member 1, 2, 3 times. Bad blood boils between so-called Brothers for Life. Mohammed Hamzi, on the right in the green t-shirt, fights back before a prison officer throws himself on the attacker. He's wedged in the middle as Mohammed pushes forward, swinging several punches. He's just been superficially wounded with a jail-made weapon. He walks backwards, grinning, before raising his finger at his once fellow gang member, Mohammed Houri, as he's dragged away. The stabbing of Hamzi, also known as Little Crazy, comes just 5 days after his cousin, Majid Hamzi, was shot dead outside his Condell Park home. He's the brother of Bassam Hamzi, the founder of bloody Sydney street gang Brothers for Life. Police aren't ruling anything out, including whether Majid's execution was a result of a drug turf war, a fight with rival crime families, or a possible internal feud. The House of Hamzi horror starts with Bassam, one of the country's most dangerous criminals who vowed to kill his brother in the 90s. His aunt Maha's Auburn home was fired at last weekend. She was shot inside the same house in March 2013. Later that year, in October, cousin Mahmoud Hamzi was accidentally killed at Revesby. The intended target was cousin Mohammed Hamzi, who's serving time for the shooting death of another Brothers for Life gang member at Greenacre in 2012. Yesterday's stabbing, the latest attack in the family's bloody history book. Police now bracing for the next chapter.
The Bankstown chapter, understandably, was the most successful of the two, since these guys have been in business much longer. As a result, Bankstown members always had an underdog mentality. According to inside sources, all hell broke loose after some Bankstown gang members referred to the Blacktown chapter as the Afghan dogs. The Lebanese had an elitist mentality and saw themselves as superior to the Afghans. The first to suffer the consequences was the man flexing an $80,000 watch. Khalid Khalil, according to police reports, was jumped by a large group of fellow gang members. Only 7 days later, the Bankstown chapter would retaliate. Despite allegedly being very close with Yahya Mohammed, LC would betray and plan an attack on the second-in-command, and Blacktown president Basim Hijazi. The two were attacked and blicked at in the middle of the highway. As they sat in a Mercedes on Greenacre Road, Yahya died on the scene. But Hijazi survived and refused to aid police investigations. Instead, he fled to Lebanon and started hiding. Bassam saw the perfect opportunity to seize back his organization. He approached the notorious gangster Farhad Kwame and urged him to take control of the rogue Blacktown chapter. Farhad's mission was to clean up the gang and take it back to its religious roots. Unfortunately for the imprisoned leader, even he couldn't put out the flames of the escalating beef that the two chapters had started. Just as the year was coming to a close, there was an assassination attempt on Bankstown President Muhammad, and this was the point of no return. The beef had reached a boiling point between Bankstown and Blacktown. Next thing you know, a man named Mahmoud Hamzi gets blicked down in broad daylight. This was Bassam's cousin, and since his rivals couldn't get to him, they ended up taking out their frustrations on his completely innocent cousin. Mahmoud wasn't engaged in any criminal activities. He was a fully innocent man just trying to provide for his family, and this was a true tragedy and something that should have never happened. Bassam wanted revenge. But surprisingly, over the next couple of months, the two rival gangs were silent. There was a couple bar fights, but nothing serious happened. During chapter meetings, both the gangs were instructing their members to keep the violence off the streets. It had somehow slipped that police were investigating the trail of bodies left from the gang feud, and gang members were trying to cover their tracks. The dust just couldn't settle in southwestern Australia. On March 9th, Bassam's innocent aunt was the next victim. A man tried to body her at the family's Auburn home in Sydney. According to police reports, he sneaked into the compound, pulled out his strap, and started dumping at the home. Even though she survived, she had to nurse at least 8 bullet wounds to her hip and legs. On November 7th, the police's months of hard work would pay off, as they successfully arrested Muhammad Al-Sik, the Bankstown Brothers for Life president. Along with him, the authorities also managed to nab other kicking figures. Muhammad got decades behind bars for the murder of Yahya Ahmad. Among other crimes, interestingly enough, the police also learned that no long after the 2012 shooting, the vicious gang paid around $400,000 as compensation to Yahya's family, with Muhammad also in prison and Basin Hajazi off the spotlight. Many thought the Brothers for Life gang was done for good. That wasn't the case, if anything. It got much worse. Farhad Kwame got much more powerful and continued serving as the gang's leader, and many testified of his brutal leadership, perhaps fearing future instability. Farhad ruled the gang with an iron fist, expecting unquestioned obedience and loyalty from its members. He ran the gang like an evil dictator and would beat members for minor offenses. According to rumors, he would beat you with a paddle if you were a minute late for chapter. His own gang members were absolutely terrified of him. Therefore, it wasn't at all surprising that many of the original Brothers for Life gang members didn't approve of Bassam's decision to keep this man in charge. Less than a year later, Bassam's own mother almost got dropped during a paid hit. In a similar manner to the hit orchestrated on his aunt, a man sneaked into the family compound, whipped out his blick, and started dumping through the door. Bassam took several bullets in the stomach. Interestingly, it wasn't a case of internal fire. The paid hit happened because Bassam owed another dealer a large amount of money and he refused to pay. Tragically, his own mother ended up being collateral damage. Luckily, she survived. After this, for a little while, there was peace. However, it didn't take long for the Brothers for Life gang to get back in the mix. The police had actually done it. Sometime that year, during a sweeping crackdown on the Brothers for Life Street gang, the Australian police arrested all 3 Kwame brothers, including the deadly stepper Farhad. They were charged with several crimes, including murder, and Farhad himself received 60 years behind bars with no parole for 43 years. Simultaneously, back in Gangland Supermax, the authorities would aggressively search Bassam's prison cell, hoping to find another phone, which they suspected he had. They didn't find it, however. They did find a flash drive containing Brothers for Life and Islamic State material. It even listed the gang's creed. When it comes to criminal street gangs, there's a hidden set of rules that govern everything from loyalty to violence, and this is known as a creed. It's essentially a secret code that members are expected to live and die by. A gang's creed is more than just a list of rules, it's a belief system that dictates how members should act, who they can associate with, and most importantly, how they should protect the gang at all costs. The public is not supposed to know the full details of these codes, but imagine what would happen if law enforcement got a hold of a gang's creed. It would be a disaster for the organization. The creed contains everything, including the hierarchy, codes for communication, rules of engagement, even how and when to retaliate. With this information, police could break down the gang structure, predict attacks, and identify key leaders. Investigators could use it to pressure members into testifying, dismantle operations, and weaken the gang's influence on the streets. This is why gangs go to extreme lengths to keep their creed secret. Any leak, whether it be from a snitch or a seized document, could lead to mass arrests, internal betrayal, or even the collapse of the entire organization. And this is why it was such a big deal that Australian police now had possession of the Brothers for Life creed. The prison authorities were now asking themselves some serious questions. How was he able to get his hands on the flash drive, and most likely the phone, that they couldn't find? There was only one conclusion. Surely their most dangerous inmate must have someone working for him behind prison walls. And this absolutely terrified the Australian police. This was the most dangerous inmate in all of Australia, and he was single-handedly responsible for the growing crime rate in the country. It turned out their suspicions were correct. Not long after, Bassem Hamzy's lawyer got arrested and had to appear in court as a defendant. He faced charges for allegedly cooperating with the criminal and aiding in the supplying of large amounts of ice. It ended up coming out that this man wasn't even a lawyer the whole time. He was a legal secretary posing as one. As a result, prison authorities would temporarily remove Bassem's client privileges. That also included any phone call to the outside. However, the restrictions didn't last long. Bassem would then successfully represent himself in the NSW Court of Criminal Appeals to overturn the decision, a move that shook even the jury. They didn't expect such a deadly and gangsta inmate to be so smart and able to express himself in such an articulate manner. Around 2 years later, an interesting video surfaced on the internet that clearly showed Bassem and Talal al-Medine squabbling in the prison yard. Few people paid attention to the video, since it wasn't rare for rival crime families to squabble inside the jail. Little did they know, this altercation would plunge Sydney into another bloody gang war. Bassem didn't squabble with any regular old inmate. The man he scrapped, Talal al-Medine, is one of the 5 primary leaders of Sydney's al-Medine crime family, who was arrested and convicted in 2015 for playing the role in the Parramatta Police Headquarters terrorist attack that claimed an officer's life. According to authorities, he is among the most dangerous inmates in Goulburn Supermax prison.
It's a family business like no other, and police say the brutal al-Medine crime network is about to be crushed. Detectives are now chasing 2 senior figures of the syndicate who went on the run as tactical police raided properties across Western Sydney.
Heavy artillery for the heavy hitters of Sydney's underworld. Strikeforce Hawk, and just like its namesake, officers swooped. 100 police involved in 13 raids across Western Sydney.
I believe today's activities are the beginning of the end
of the bloody war between the al-Medine and Hamzy families.
They have participated in coordinating of murders and shootings.
The recent feud started in October 2020 when Rafat al-Medine's former home was shot at. The next day, Majid Hamzy was killed. Family matriarch Maha Hamzy, the victim of a drive-by shooting. Crime boss Bilal Hamzy, executed in the CBD. Police foiled an attempt to murder Ibrahim Hamzy on Sydney's North Shore. Father and son Tufik and Salim Hamzy shot at outside their home.
Unfortunately, we have crime gangs that are making the lives of our citizens unsafe.
Seized high-end vehicles, guns and ammunition.
Today's operations have New South Wales Police bringing home the bacon.
Uncovered too, a money laundering scheme. Who police are looking for, though, 2 lieutenants of the al-Medines, Masood Zakaria and Ali Yunus, wanted over violent crimes.
I am urging both of those individuals to surrender themselves to the nearest police station.
And it won't end there.
Between the 2 of them, there would be more than 310 active members.
Police promising to keep up the pressure until they're destroyed. Leonie Ryan, 7 News.
Only a couple years prior, there was a series of bodies that got dropped, all because of pride and a minor prison fight. Only a couple weeks later, Safwan Sherbaji was blicked down while walking in Condell Park. 3 weeks later, on the 20th, Wali Ahmad was blicked down in Bankstown. The violence in the streets didn't stop there. The gangs kept sliding, and on October 19th, Majid Hamzy was blicked down outside his home. Surveillance footage disturbingly showed how the 2 black cloud assassins patiently waited and started dumping as soon as the victim stepped onto his driveway. Despite being shot, McGee tried running away before falling dead outside his friend's house. McGee's death was catastrophic. After all, he was Bassam's brother and the authorities were sure. Brothers for Life would demand vengeance and want a trail of bodies to be left as retaliation for what happened.
Majid Hamzi was killed in what police say was a brazen and targeted attack here at Condell Park this morning. Police say two men were waiting outside his home on Simmet Avenue before firing several shots as he left the front yard. Mr Hamzi suffered multiple gunshot wounds before stumbling around 200 metres and collapsing on the road. By the time paramedics arrived at the scene, he was already dead.
On arrival, we located a male with multiple gunshot wounds. Despite the efforts of emergency services, the male died at the scene. The crime scene has been established. An investigation has been commenced with the assistance of the homicide squad.
Family members and friends of the alleged victim turned up at the scene in tears as riot police swarmed the area and detectives began door-knocking residents.
I don't believe it. I can't believe it. We were together yesterday having a barbecue.
A burnt-out car was found at nearby Yaguna and police believe it may be one of the getaway cars used by the two gunmen. Majid Hamzi is the youngest brother of Bassam Hamzi, a notorious Brothers for Life gang leader and convicted murderer now serving time behind bars at Goulburn Supermax. A manhunt is now underway for two men seen leaving in a car a short time after the attack. Anyone with information is being urged to contact Crime Stoppers.
Bassam and his brother were extremely close, and there had been rumors circulating for years that they had dropped a couple bodies together back in the day. Despite all of Bassam's character flaws, he truly loved his brother, and after he found out he got slumped, all he could see was red. Bassam was ready to tear up the streets of Australia. He wanted his guys to slide back to back until everyone that could have had any involvement was slumped. He didn't care who got dropped, whether it be the wives, girlfriends, or even mothers. He just wanted retaliation for his biological brother. In what seemed like an overnight turn of events, the streets of Sydney turned into a battlefield. The Brothers for Life gang was committing daily drive-bys, and they were dumping at anyone that looked like a rival. Almost every week, the police found a severely burned getaway vehicle. Disposed somewhere in an alley, the gang had gotten reckless. How these attacks were happening was seriously disturbing. We're talking about criminals wandering about with blicks, in broad daylight and exchanging fire in public. The Alamedini gang war was worse than the internal Brothers for Life war. It was so bad that there were countless cases of gang members dumping at the wrong houses and blicking at innocent people who had nothing to do with the gang war. When you join a criminal street gang, you know what you are signing up for, and you recognize that there is a chance you might get smoked by one of your rivals. But for the fully innocent men that were just trying to work a 9-to-5 and provide for their families, they didn't sign up for this lifestyle, and to try and blick at them when they had nothing to do with anything gang-related is truly evil. Far too many innocent people end up getting affected by criminal street gangs. On January 30th, Mustafa Noman was blicked down in Hurstville, in what was a tragic case of a mistaken identity. Ibrahim Hamzi was out there in the streets trying to get revenge and add another body to the scoreboard for his Brothers for Life gang. Since his rivals, the Alameddine gang, had just scored a point for a recent body they slumped. It was time for get back, and Bro was out hunting for rivals and putting in work when the police caught up to him and he was arrested.
Tonight, 3 senior members of Sydney's notorious Hamzi family are behind bars, charged over a daylight kidnapping at Marylands. One of them, Ibrahim Hamzi, touching down at Bankstown last night before facing the fresh claims.
A wild abduction in Sydney's west, watched by shocked neighbours.
They just kidnapped the guy.
A 24-year-old bundled into a van at Marylands, later stabbed and dumped at Birrong last September. Police allege crime boss Ibrahim Hamzi organised the kidnapping. He touched down in Sydney last night after his arrest on the Gold Coast. He's also accused of organising a conspiracy to murder rival Alameddine associates outside a Prospect childcare centre in November, where bullets narrowly missed toddlers. Yesterday, police also nabbed brothers Haysam and Tariq Hamzi for their alleged role in the kidnapping. All up, 7 men are behind bars. None of the Hamzi relatives applied for bail, meaning they'll all spend tonight in custody.
Will your client be defending these charges? I won't be making any comments at this stage.
Perhaps a blessing in disguise for Ibrahim.
Police had gotten intel that there was a lot of money on Ibrahim's head. Police strongly believe that had he not gotten arrested, then he would have been the one to get slumped and he would have added a point for the Salamadin gang.
Who has a target on his head, being the last senior member of the Hamzy family still standing in an ongoing gangland war. Emma Partridge, 9 News.
On the same day, the police also found the burnt body of Majid Darbus in Smithfield. According to autopsy reports, Majid was blicked down and slumped, and he was found later in the back of the getaway vehicle. In February, a failed assassination attempt went down at the World Gym in Prospect. This almost caused colossal damage. 2 bullets missed their intended target, which was an Alamad gang member, and went straight into the wall of a daycare center, narrowly missing a toddler who was playing inside. 1 bullet nearly hit a nurse who luckily survived. Around 4 months later in June, another Hamzy gang member got dropped. This time it was Bilal Hamzy. He was slumped in a brutal execution-style murder in Sydney. The police tried to warn him that there was money on his head. However, he didn't listen. Instead, he sought to hide in the busy streets of Sydney, believing that his enemies wouldn't dare take him out in public. Unfortunately for him, he was wrong. According to witness reports, Bilal was on a date with a Kim Kardashian look-alike when he decided to step outside for some fresh air. That's when he was greeted by 2 men in an Audi. The goons opened fire, taking him out on the busy street. Everyone around witnessed the assassins make a U-turn and then start dumping at Bilal again, who was now lying on the ground begging for mercy. 2 months later, the Brothers for Life gang retaliated. Shady Kanji, a low-level Alameddin gang member, was blicked at in Chester Hill and found slumped by police in Guildford. A week later, the Alameddinis tried to slide back. However, Abraham Hamzy was lucky. The police intervened before Bro got slumped. Another 4 months later, father and son Selim and Toothik Hamzy got dropped in cold blood outside their Guildford home. To the police's surprise, the 2 were completely innocent and weren't even in on the illegal businesses. It seemed like the Alamadians were done playing around and took out anybody who is even remotely related to Bassem Hamzy. It was also during this time that the police did a lavish investigation on the luxury car firm in the middle of Sydney. According to the authorities, the investigation was part of the in-your-face strategy against the Hamzys and Alameddinis.
We've arrested 82 people. We've conducted 159 search warrants. We've preferred 327 charges. We've recovered 25 high-end vehicles. So this morning at 6 a.m, Tactical Police and Raptor Squad Police executed 13 search warrants simultaneously across Western Sydney. We've recovered a number of stolen vehicles. We've recovered a number of firearms. We look like this afternoon we've uncovered evidence related to the manufacture of firearms. We've arrested 2 people, a male and a female. The female has been charged with bank loan fraud relative to money laundering in the particular organised crime group. The male in terms of a number of affrays relative to the Alameddin organised crime network. We also have a male in custody at the moment we're processing for the theft of high-end motor vehicles. In particular, 2 lieutenants of the organised crime network that we're disrupting today are now wanted. So Masood Zakaria, who's subject of a serious crime prevention order, 26 years of age, is now wanted in connection with non-compliance of the serious crime prevention order.
From Ferraris to Porsches and Lamborghinis, they inspected everything on display. Allegedly, about a dozen of the vehicles were used by high-ranking members of the Alameddin crime network in various illegal activities. In fact, one Bentley Continental, in particular, was connected to a drive-by. These guys were dumping at their rivals in style. As recently as January 6th, Guzan Amun was slumped in a brazen daylight hit. Witnesses reported seeing a man approach a parked Beamer and open fire on Hamzy's brother, dropping the man and adding another body to the scoreboard. Luckily, the friend in the passenger seat survived the hit. Following the incident in March, it was rumored by the Brothers for Life gang sources that the Hamzy gang was tired of Bassem's leadership In criminal street gangs, everyone is always fighting for power, and eventually your day is going to come. Everyone wants to be the big dog in charge with all the power, respect, and pretty girls. Nobody wants to be a stepper forever. Eventually, they want to be the ones calling the shots and sending the steppers on missions. A lot of the bodies the gang was dropping were over a simple jail fight, and the gang had started losing respect for their leader. They didn't want to spend the rest of their lives sliding and going on missions for a man behind bars that a lot of the younger members had few interactions with. The Hamzas were seemingly fading out of existence. A lot of their key members either got dropped or were serving decades behind bars. This gang was losing a lot of its power in the streets, and the foot soldiers they had left were tired of drilling on the rivals. Today, only a few older members stand by his side, as most prefer his younger, more charismatic cousin Abraham Hamzi. Abraham is also in prison, just like his older cousin. He got arrested after he was caught dumping at an Al Medani gang member. The Hamzis will have to sort out their issues quickly, as their rivals are still hot on their tail and want to wipe them out to extinction. The Al Medines have now clicked up with new gangs. Apparently, their mission is to take full control over Sydney's lucrative illegal markets and eliminate whatever competition stands in their way. On top of that, the police have improved their efforts against both parties. They now have a new task force to put an end to the back-and-forth gang war. Additionally, they're also working on the implementation of new, controversial legal harassment laws that will allow officers to search hardened criminals without search warrants. The authorities will also control where they bank, the phones they use, what cars they drive, and even where they live. The idea is to make life in crime so difficult that the participants either stop or leave the country. Even though things are now relatively calm, it's hard to predict what will happen next. The war has evolved beyond illegal substances, turf wars, or even money. It's now also a matter of honor, pride, and not showing weakness. The whole war started over a simple prison fight. It's crazy what people will do over pride. According to authorities, no gang appears to be backing down, and with each punch thrown, the other side is more likely to retaliate. It's also worth mentioning that, even though his gang might have allegedly rejected him, Bassam is not out of the fight. Gang experts hint that he has founded a new Brothers for Life chapter, the Illawarra chapter. Unlike the other two that were seemingly corrupted by drugs and money, this one strictly upholds a skewed version of Islamic ideals. Instead of tattoos featuring guns and crime scenes, they have scriptures engraved on their backs up to their necks. Damien Featherstone is the alleged president of the new chapter, who was appointed after meeting Bassam Hamzi in the Goulburn Supermax prisonery. Like Bassam, Featherstone is considered to be quite charismatic, and despite being a violent recovering ice addict, he shows resolve characteristics and total devotion to his faith. Only time will tell what the gang will amount to. The big dog Bassam is still in jail until July 5, 2035. Hopefully by then, the Australian authorities will have ended the war and prevented further escalation. When it comes to criminal street gangs, a lot of young men are born into an environment where they had no other option. Their mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters are part of the same street gang, and from a young age, their parents teach them about life in the streets. For a lot of these young men, after they lose a family member, they end up going hard in the streets, and that is how you get some of the most deadly crash outs. With all that being said, there is nothing cool about being in a gang, and while I can understand joining if you were born into an environment that has no option, if you're the type of person that wasn't born in that kind of environment and you search it out because you think it's cool like the suburban gangs I've been covering, I have little to no respect for you, especially if you are victimizing innocent civilians. For anyone watching this video that thinks the gangbanging lifestyle is cool, is 1 year of excitement worth spending the rest of your life behind bars with a bunch of men? These videos are completely free to watch and take a lot of time to make, so if you enjoy this content, make sure to follow, leave a comment, and drop a like.